Welcome to the 24th Annual D.I.C.E Awards conversation with our nominees up for Action Game of the Year. Congratulations to all of our nominees. Action games are extremely difficult to get right considering the sheer volume of player expectations and community, what community brings to the table every year. The stakes are extremely high, but when you get a chance to push the legacy forward, you're doing some heavy, serious lifting. Let's introduce our nominees for today. Coming to us from Half-Life Alyx, we have Robin Walker. How are you doing, Robin?
I'm good, thanks.
Give the folks at home a little bit of info about the work you've done in the industry so far.
I'm a programmer and designer. I've been at Valve over 20 years now. On Alyx, I did a bunch of stuff focusing on AI and enemy behaviors, stuff like that was my main contribution to the action side of things.
Fantastic, fantastic. So happy to have you here. From Hades, we have Gavin Simon. How are you doing, Gavin?
I'm great, thank you.
Good. Give the folks at home a little info about the work you've done as well.
So I actually started as a tester on the Command and Conquer series at Westwood Studios a long time ago. Got a degree in computer science and focusing in artificial intelligence, and worked Command and Conquer for a few years before starting Supergiant Games just over 10 years ago now. It's been a long, fun journey since then.
Brilliant. Thank you so much for being here. Also from Doom Eternal, we have Hugo Martin. How you doing, Hugo?
Good. Hoping you don't hear my kids.
No, no worries at all. Give the folks at home a little info about the work you've done as well.
I been working in the games industry for a while and did some film work. Worked at Naughty Dog, worked on Pacific Rim, and then I came to id Software about 8 years ago. I was director on 2016 and now on game director on Doom Eternal. And it's just awesome to be here. It's an honor.
Very, very happy to have you as well. Coming in from Marvel's Spider-Man, Miles Morales, we have Brian Horton. How you doing, Brian?
Doing great. Thanks for having us.
Awesome. Please give the folks at home a little info about the work you've done as well.
I've been in the industry about 26 years. I've been at Insomniac for 3, and I worked on Marvel Spider-Man and then Marvel Spider-Man Miles Morales as the creative director. I just helped Brian Intihar out on the first one. And even though I have a title of creative director, he's the one that deserves all the credit for the first game. But it's been great working on Miles.
And joining us from the Nioh 2 team, we have Yasuda-san. How are you doing, Yasuda-san? Thank you so much for being here.
こんにちは。今日は皆さんと一緒にいられて、非常に嬉しく思います。私はチーム忍者で15年間働いていて、ニオシリーズのディレクターを務めていて、ニオ2ではプロデューサーとディレクターを、務めています。
It's great to be here with everybody. Thanks again for having me. I've been working on the Team Ninja team for 15 years at this point, and I'm also the director of the Nioh series and also working as the producer of the Nioh series as well.
Yasuda-san, so it seems like the stakes get raised every year in this category. What are you doing in you and the team to make sure that you're keeping up with the expectations from the players that you bring to the table?
そうですね。基本的にはどんなゲームもプレイしてますけど、本当に素晴らしいアクションゲームが毎年のように出てきてますんで、そこに、ついていけるように、プレイヤーとしてもちゃんとプレイしながら、普段のニオにフィードバックするようにっていうのはチーム全体で意識してやってます。
So that's a really great question. What we're doing at Team Ninja specifically is, we're making sure to also put ourselves in the role of the player and actually play all of these amazing games that are coming out, and then taking our own feedback and just kind of our ideas from and impressions that we're getting from the games we play it, and then factoring those, different points that we're seeing in these fantastic games into Nioh as well.
I love that. I'm curious to hear your thoughts as well, Hugo, about with Doom Eternal kind of being in the space as a sequel and having the expectations kind of set from the previous game. What are you all in the team kind of thinking about to kind of keep those expectations in a good spot for players as well?
I think we have to exceed, obviously you want to exceed the expectations. If you give them more of the same, you don't come with the freshness of the first one. So they'll just lose interest, so we look to try to refine the experience, bring up the best parts of the game, and really try to chip away at the parts where we feel like the previous game maybe had some imbalances. I mean, I think you're never as good or as bad as you think you are, you know. So you look back on what you did objectively, you sift away the top, very tippy top stuff of people who think it's the greatest game ever, and the very bottom stuff of people think it's the worst thing ever made. And somewhere in there, there's some good qualitative feedback, and I think we try to like just refine the experience overall and hopefully exceed players' expectations and increase engagement levels throughout, where they're really just compelled to continue to play and they find themselves engrossed in the experience.
Gavin, you and the team had a really kind of special, task to deal with in that space where, folks got a taste of the game early on and then kind of, had a chance to wait until the full retail version came out. What was the conversation in terms of, exceeding player expectations there for you and the team?
Yeah, we're trying to collect feedback from our early access community as much as possible and see what different people are saying about it. We set up a Discord server and collected feedback from all over the internet, and just wanted to listen to what people were saying, the good and the bad, and kind of try to double down or dig into the parts that were working as much as we could to really find out what it was about those aspects of the game that people loved, and the parts that weren't working, try to similarly figure out what it was about them that was falling short, and just keep iterating update by update as we went.
Yeah. Robin, I want to pose that question to you, but also add another layer to it. Player engagement is super important for a game like Alyx. There's a lot of things for the player to kind of understand in the world, and kind of, especially because of the format in the game that it comes to the player. How do you kind of see not only the conversation around exceeding those player expectations being paramount, but also how do you kind of use the mechanics that are in the game to kind of advance, what those ideas might be for those players?
Not worry too much about it. I mean, we think of, you can't sort of generally imagine the future. You've got to sort of see it before you can understand it, I guess. And so, we don't try to beat ourselves up by trying to design everything up front. Like, at the start of Alyx, we couldn't tell you why it was going to be interesting to customers. We had some theories that were fed by what we learned from building previous Half-Life games, and those theories collided with some theories we had from building the lab and playing other VR titles. And so you've got a bunch of guesses as to things that customers might enjoy, and in those you can sort of, we often look for fertility, I guess, is it, how fertile is the space, right? If I look at the collision of a couple of those opportunities, can I immediately think of 50 other things that could go there, or is it sort of hard to think of more than a couple? And so in those early days, when you're in sort of more of a search space than a design space, you're really just trying to find areas that look like they have a lot of potential, and so build some stuff there primarily to learn about it and put that in front of customers and see what happens. And over time, sometimes you can get quite a way along the path before you realize, oh wait, this is turning out really well. This is really interesting. People are really responding well to it, and then eventually that becomes some significant part of the product. But the sort of the significance comes sort of second, right, after you've sort of seen it in action already.
Yeah, and Brian, I'd love to hear your thoughts on this as well, because I know expectations around puddles were a big part of the conversation for a long period of time, just within your game alone. I'm curious to hear your thoughts about how to keep up with and exceed player expectations as well.
Well, we had a couple fronts. Like, we had to be a launch title for the PlayStation 5, so it needed to showcase all the wonderful aspects of what make the PlayStation 5 awesome. But more importantly, we wanted to make sure we were telling an engaging, engrossing story and continuing the great, fun, fluid mechanics of Spider-Man by bringing something new and making everything that we did for Miles feel like his own unique Spider-Man. So that was our paramount task, is how do we make Miles feel special? And it was a combination of mechanics with his bioelectricity and his invisibility and what cool gameplay that afforded, as well as this very specific person who is going to maneuver through the world because of who he is. So we put a lot of focus on story and characters as well. So that's why we think Spider-Man worked really well, is its relatability, but also its accessibility. Like a lot of people could enjoy that game. So we wanted to make sure all that stuff was intact while bringing something new.
Yeah, it felt like going from the first game to the second game, that there were very, very specific parts that you wanted to nail. Locomotion, making sure the players felt fluid in the way that they were doing things, and kind of connecting all of that fluidity into the way that it all kind of worked with the fight style and Miles in that way. Do you feel like there were parts of that conversation that you felt like you were kind of getting inspiration from other not necessarily just games in the space, but other the other mediums and other formats of things that kind of felt like you were pulling in that as well?
Yeah, we're always trying to balance player input and responsiveness also with the idea of filmic spectacle, right? So we put a lot of time and attention into trying to blend seamlessly those moments of cinematic spectacle with gameplay using our systemic core mechanics. So like, for instance, Venom moves or bioelectric punches. How can we make that more visually spectacular? There was a lot of work on cinematography in those moments, as well as the big save moments that we have throughout the game to try to make them feel epic and cool, but fluid, going from pure gameplay experience into these really curated cinematic experiences. So that was definitely one of our big goals.
I love that. I love that. For Hades, I'm curious. We talked a little bit about early access, but I'd love to hear a little bit more thoughts about, what were some of the changes that kind of came along during the process from early access to, the final game, that kind of kept in line with that kind of really great, fast-paced action game feel.
Yeah, sure. So to give a specific example, when Hades first launched in early access, people, were definitely enjoying it and giving us a lot of good feedback. But there's definitely a pervasive thread that something wasn't quite right about the combat, or that it even felt sticky at times. And so we eventually narrowed it down to the core movement ability, the dash in the game. The original dash was actually conceived as more of like a blink that teleported you forward instantly, and then had a very brief recovery pause for balance. So after we kind of identified that, we iterated on it a lot and changed it to more smoothly lerp between the start and end point with a few carefully selected iframes in the middle. It was functionally actually pretty similar, but if you were looking at it, you could tell, but really the just kind of subconscious feel of it made all the difference. And then on top of that, we also added input buffering to attacks during that lurk period, so you could queue up your inputs and have them smoothly fire when the dash finished, and have it feel like you didn't drop as many button inputs. And so kind of once we dialed in the frame by frame tuning of that new dash, that feedback kind of went away. And of course we continued to deal with that with every new weapon we added, but that really helped contribute to the smooth feel in the final game.
I love that, because it is very difficult sometimes to try to figure out when you're adding new bits to the puzzle of how do you differentiate between those new parts and the stuff that you had previously put in, but also keeping it, feeling different enough so that the player feels like they're getting some more value in that space. So I appreciate that for sure. Yasuda-san, I would love to hear your thoughts about, in Nioh 2, how did you figure out the right way of balancing out the gameplay that you have in the game? It feels like there's danger at every turn when you're kind of playing the game, but it feels like you found a good way to keep players engaged without them feeling overwhelmed. I'd love to hear your thoughts about how you achieve that.
そうですね。プレイヤーが息苦しくなってしまうような敵が多すぎる状態にはならないように間引いて緩急を作ったり、敵が配置される距離感の調整には苦心しました。
So yeah, we put a lot of effort into thinning out groups of enemies, for example, as well as adjusting the space between them so that players wouldn't feel overwhelmed with too many enemies in any one area.
ゲームオーバーになった時にはプレイヤーが冷静にもう一回プレイをできるように客観的になれるような BGM だったり社の雰囲気っていうものを演出してます。
Yeah, when players get a game over, we wanted to help the player compose themselves and take a minute to think about the situation objectively or even personally before diving back in. So we worked on the music and the overall feel of the shrine in order to accomplish this.
あとはその可愛い小玉とかスネコスリっていう妖怪がいることで、少しこう癒されるような感じにもなってるのかなと思います。
In addition, I think the presence of cute yokai like Kodama and Scampus can have a really calming effect on the player as well.
I love that. Yeah, it's I feel like the balance that you've found in Nioh 2 has been something that made me as a player who was always worried about, having the difficulty to be too great. It felt like the balance that you've kind of finally landed on felt really good. How long did it kind of take to feel like the balance was in a good spot?
そうですね、ニオ2は発売の半年以上前にデモを配信して、プレイヤーの意見とか反応っていうのは追いながら、そこでこう微調整をかけながらっていう意味で言うと、やっぱり1年弱はかかった部分ですね。
Yeah, so about a half year before the game released, we were releasing a demo version for players to play to be able to get feedback and then, get those fine-tuned adjustments in as well. But I'd say it was probably at least a year before we really got that good balance in Nioh 2 that we were very satisfied with.
Thank you for sharing that. I appreciate that answer for sure. This one is for Robin and for Hugo. Both of you having worked on and working on, these iconic characters in these iconic IPs for so long, and they've had this established, fandom and all the parts that kind of connect to that. What aspects from the history of both Doom and Half-Life did you kind of make sure to include in the game so that the nostalgia folks had something for them, but also you're bringing new things for folks who are coming to the series for the first time? I'm going to start off with Hugo on that one for sure.
Tons, we really, for those that are looking for it and who care, we make a lot of the older games canon from a lore perspective, from a overall balance perspective in the feel of the game. We wanted to make it feel, we borrowed a lot of parts from the original Doom that we thought still applied today. It's why the game has aged so well, like the idea of resource management and the impact that smart resource management can have on the player in terms of increasing, their engagement levels with the game. Wanted to make a thinking person's, action game. And I think that, the original Doom had a lot of that. A lot of people's memory of the original Doom is just turning on a cheat code. That's how I played Doom the first time. But then you play the real one where you gotta rockets are hard to come by, and the rocket kind of does a massive amounts of self-damage, and we've all died to a demon that popped out in front of us and stuff. And just how intelligently designed they were by honestly just being really firm with the player. Yes, this gun is powerful, and I know you'd like to use it all the time, but here's some basic rules, and the game will, the engagement around the game will be better for it. So I would say the underlying structure of the game, as well as some of the wrapping on the game in terms of the look of the characters, so much is inspired by the original Doom. We actually remodeled a lot of the characters in this one to look more like the originals. So yeah, tons.
Robin, I'll leave you with that one as well.
Yeah, we spent a lot of time worrying about sort of the line between nostalgia and novelty on Alyx, especially in the sort of opening chapter, because we were highly conscious of the fact that it had been quite some time since the last product in the franchise. So we couldn't sort of bank on every player having much of a memory of it. And so at the same time, we wanted to make sure that there were those sort of nostalgic tugs for anyone who did play those games. So we spent a bunch of time looking back at those products. We had the benefit of still having a bunch of people who had worked on those products still around. And in the end, I think we sort of had built sort of a framework that everyone on the team could understand about sort of what a Half-Life sort of canonical experience is, and which is, you know, really about the way it blends together several different genres into a sort of a seamless whole, such that the player is sort of moving between an action game and a puzzle game and a story-driven game, and, you know, without you really realizing it, and that those various genres are going to blend together and form something that's, you know, sometimes a little unique. And so with that sort of framework, it became, I think, fairly easy for us to have sort of a language for which, you know, to talk to each other about whether or not something was sort of felt like it belonged or didn't belong. And then when you put that in front of customers, that sort of framework helped us evaluate the things they were saying back to us.
Yeah, I'm curious because I know we're almost to the point of giving away our award tonight, but I'm really curious to hear from each of you. You know, this genre is very, very special in the way that it kind of has its visual language, its kind of, you know, input language, and the way that kind of works for most players. Is there something very special that you really do kind of, you know, love about the genre itself that feels really, you know, akin to how you kind of have come to it with the games that you've made? Is there some kind of special sauce about that as well? I'm going to go to you, Robin, again really quickly, and then we'll kind of go around the horn for that one.
Gosh, I mean, as to say, Half-Life sort of blends together these multiple genres, so we never sort of feel like we can lean too heavily into, you know, one to the, you know, sort of to the detriment of the others. But I think, you know, when I think about action games and I think about sort of the core of them that makes them work for me, I think it comes down to the attention they pay to the responsiveness around players' inputs. And, you know, the fundamental unique thing about our medium relative to linear mediums is that we have the player contributing their input and their ideas. And it seems sort of natural to me that one of the, you know, most pervasive genres is the one that cares the most about the sort of that keeping that layer, you know, the distance between the player's input and the game's response down to as sort of thin a barrier as possible. Because, you know, it's like that's where the sort of metal hits the road. And so that makes some sense to me.
Yeah. Gavin, I'd love to hear your thoughts on that as well.
Yeah, I mean, it's really hard to point to a single secret sauce that's there. I'd say one thing we do is we just check in with ourselves all the time throughout the development of like, we've all internally, we're playing this game for dozens or hundreds or thousands of hours, and like, does it still feel good to us to play? Or does, like, you know, having to do another play test, do another run in the case of our roguelike, is it feel like a chore, or we're excited to just, you know, get back in there, and whether it's you know, the moment to moment gameplay of, you know, hitting dudes with a sword still feels really good, or you know, the whole gameplay loop is just something you're excited to get into. And you know, if it starts to feel a little tiring, then maybe gotta figure out why.
Brian, I want to throw that question to you, but I also want to add the icing on the cake of what is it like to kind of work with such an iconic character like Spider-Man and Miles Morales as well in that space.
Well, one, that, you know, it's a childhood fantasy to work on a character like Spider-Man, just because I think every single one of us in this room is probably touched by this character, and you have their own vision of what a Spider-Man is to play. But I think for us, the way Insomniac is always sort of driven their games is fast, fun, responsive controls that are exciting loops. So it's the small loop going across the large game. So the swinging just had to feel fun. And for Miles, it was his specific expression through tricks and how we can make that feel exciting. And then it came down to, like, how can we make that one bioelectric punch just feel amazing? Anything you did on top of that would just be even more exciting. So we really focus on those tight loops that are going to be exciting and something, you know, you're going to do over and over and over again. And it's like everyone's been saying, it's like, once you have that right, you just try to intelligently build and give different levers that are going to complement that core ingredient. But yeah, that's what's awesome about working in Insomniac is it is a studio that loves making fun mechanics.
Mm-hmm. Yasuda-san, I'd love to hear your thoughts about working in the action genre, and what is your kind of favorite part that you get to touch and influence?
そうですね、アクションゲーム、私たちはチーム忍者はずっと作っていて、その中でも特に刀を使ったアクションっていうのを大事に作ってます。で、やっぱ刀のアクションといえば、私たち日本人だからできることかなっていうことで、そういった近接のコンバットっていうものは一番大事にしたいなと思ってます。
Yeah, so here at Team Ninja, one thing that we really want to, focus on and we really enjoy, creating in our games, would definitely have to be, utilizing swords, specifically Japanese samurai swords, katanas. And that's something, we really have fun developing and want to really put a lot of emphasis on and take forward in our games. So that's definitely a very important aspect of our action games, and especially that kind of close range combat as well.
で、ニオ2だと、ニオシリーズだとそういった刀を持って相手も刀で戦ったりとか、強大な妖怪だったりっていう敵と戦う中でプレイヤーがこう試行錯誤していって、その強敵を倒した時の達成感みたいなものがやっぱり一番コンセプトとしてあって、そこに試行錯誤のところにやっぱりアクションの手触りだったり気持ちよさだったりっていうものが絶対に存在すると思うので、それを追求していくっていうのがアクションゲームを作る理由でもあるし、目的でもなってるかなと思います。
I feel like one of the great things about developing action games and kind of our goal, when we're creating these titles is to make sure that, with the player, and this is also, of course, very relevant to Nioh 2, we want to make sure that the player has an experience where they can tackle these difficult situations through a process of trial and error. And through that trial and error, they learn more about the game teaches them different aspects, and they can, get this great sense of satisfaction from, overcoming those obstacles or difficult enemies or tough challenges. So that's something that's really important with, action games in general, and something that we really want to take forward and continue to pursue moving forward.
I love that answer. And Hugo, we're going to end with you on that one. What's your favorite part of working in the action space?
Well, specifically for Doom, I think, being able to pull it all together with sound and basically put the player in control of their own action film, where they are the fight choreographer and the conductor of the chaos, and that through the mastery of the mechanics and the acquisition of skill that they alone control, they are able to feel that sense of power surge throughout the game. And then if in moments when it's all right, it all comes together and you just scrape by and come back from the brink of death and land that perfect headshot, or have that great moment and your heart's pounding and the music kicks in. And I think all of these games, obviously do a tremendous job of this, and so many others, that it just feels awesome. I am not the observer of the action. I am the director of it, with the controls in my hands.
Well, I'm excited, and again, thank you all for sharing so many wonderful thoughts. I wish that right at the end of that sentence, a great Doom guitar riff would have come out of nowhere, and I was been able to started that part of the process. But now I get a chance to give away our Action Game of the Year award. Again, thank you so much for all being here. You're all fantastic at what you do, and excited to have you all nominated for this award. Our award for the Action Game of the Year goes to Hades. Hades,
wow.
you snagged it. Awesome, awesome, awesome. Congrats, Gavin. If you want to give the folks at home a little bit of, a couple of words before we all let you go.
Thank you so much. Yeah, wow, this is a huge honor. In the past, our games have been praised for their outstanding art, music, writing, atmosphere. So it's a huge compliment that in Hades, the gameplay and feel rose to that same level of recognition. So yeah, as everyone at the table here knows, making games takes so much difficult cross-disciplinary effort and so many trade-offs that it's really hard to ever stand out in one or more than one area. So especially to be recognized by our peers in the game industry is incredibly humbling.
It's fantastic. And again, you've all done such fantastic work in this space. So, before we let you go, Robin, Gavin, Hugo, Brian, and Yasuda-san, thank you so much for you and the work that your teams have done this year and in every time that you put out a wonderful game out to the world, for helping us definitely get our blood pumping and getting our blood flowing when it comes to the games that you've made. So everybody at home, thank you so much. And then we'll be right back.